Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 36 of B-Road Ballers, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of hot hatches from, of course, various countries. Many of the cars that are featured on Gran Turismo that are typically the best in the performance category tend to be the Japanese models, which isn't too surprising given that the majority of the cars in the game are Japanese. This particular model is actually one of my favourite cars in the game. It's a car which, until Gran Turismo 6, I didn't actually care about. It was a car which I didn't particularly dislike, I just didn't care about either way. I had no reason to. It's from a company which is relatively understated, they don't show off that much, and they're just sleeper makers. Basically, they make great little performance cars that are appreciated by very small but loyal fan bases. And I would count myself in that fan base. Since Gran Turismo 6 has opened my eyes to just how good these cars can be, I count myself as a fan of Daihatsu, which sounds like a strange thing to say. But they make amazing performance cars, and a couple of years ago I would have never thought that that would be something that I would have said. This car, though, is the first model that, on Gran Turismo 6 at least, turned my opinion around on them. Or at least gave me an opinion on them, because as I said, I didn't really care about their cars before. This particular model is the Storia, or Sirion, and in particular the Cross 4 model. This is a car which is very, very easy to overlook in the dealerships. At the end of the day, how many people on Gran Turismo specifically go to the Daihatsu dealership at all, let alone for this car? The vast majority of players probably don't really care about Daihatsu models, understandably so. They make small, affordable, relatively slow and underpowered cars, so why would you need to buy one? But, on the off chance, I bought a Storia Cross 4, and it shocked me by just how insanely good it actually is. It's my favourite sleeper car in the game, by far. Now, it's not the fastest sleeper car. There are far faster ones, such as the Lexus GS 300, but it is extremely good at what it does. Now, the car has, on paper, in its stock form, specs which can initially sound not that great. It only has a 713cc turbo engine. That's only a 0.7 litre. And it's all-wheel drive, which seems kind of unnecessary on the surface of things. But it puts out 118 horsepower or thereabouts. And you can easily gloss over that fact until you actually stop and think about it. Wait a second, 118 horsepower is actually a lot for such a tiny engine. That's not much bigger an engine than a K car, but that's double the power of a K car. So this car may actually be something special, and it is. Because when you fully tune it, this car puts out 343 horsepower, which is essentially like putting literally R34 Skyline power into something which is essentially the automotive equivalent of a jelly bean. It's insane. It also puts out 231 foot-pounds of torque, and, as I mentioned just now, has all-wheel drive. Combine that with a weight of just 732 kilos despite having all-wheel drive, and it launches off the line like an absolute rocket. This car can be tuned to launch to 60 miles per hour with the aid of NOS in around 2 seconds. That's insane, especially for 343 horsepower. You try and find another car on the game that can do 0 to 60 as quick as that with that little power. There are some, but not many at all can do that kind of performance. And it's not just about acceleration. The top speed of this car is actually not at all bad either. It's in excess of 180, it can go over 220 with NOS and even more with draft. So it is a phenomenal little performance car. Add on top of that the fact that it only costs just under 14,000 credits, making it quite literally one of the cheapest cars in the game. And the value for money is through the roof. It puts out 469 horsepower per tonne, which doesn't sound like a huge amount, and in the grand scheme of things, isn't a huge amount really. But for a hot hatch, that's very good, especially for a 14 grand hot hatch. What about the handling? Well, it's all-wheel drive, relatively small, and lightweight. So it'd be hard for it to be bad, really. But the handling is outstandingly good, and one of the reasons why it's so good is because although it's a small Japanese hatch, it's not a K car, because K cars, although small, can actually sometimes feel a little bit too narrow. They almost feel a little bit wobbly because of how comparatively tall they are in relation to their width, which can sometimes incline them towards being a little bit top-heavy. This car isn't, because it's actually quite wide, given how tall and long it is, and that gives it quite a good stance. It grounds the car quite well, and it means that it doesn't really roll around much in corners. It stays relatively planted and handles more like what you'd expect from something like a Subaru Impreza than a small Daihatsu. Around the track, it can give you absolutely incredible lap times, and although its PP is perhaps a little bit too high at 540, it is still a phenomenal performance machine. And if you can't already tell, I would quite obviously recommend trying out this car. This is a car which certainly isn't for everyone, but ironically enough, the fact that it's not for everyone kind of makes it good for everyone. And what I mean by that is that nobody thinks it will be any good. And that's exactly what makes it so good. That is the definition of a sleeper. A car which is easy to underestimate, but is actually amazingly good. And this is the definition of that. It's a car which couldn't really have come from a more humble company, Daihatsu, a more underestimated company. It has a low power, a low engine capacity, a low price, and it's painted white of all colours, which is about as understated as you can get. But it's an absolute monster in a straight line and around the track, and certainly for the price. And apart from some, such as, say, the Focus RS or the HPA Golf, there are quite literally very, very few cars in this entire series that can genuinely take on this car. But that's it for this episode overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.